It wasn't the broken down car or the miles of empty road that scared me. It was the way the things in the dark moved together like a pack, and how they stopped pretending to be human when they saw I was alone. Nightbound Bloodline presents 5 true highway horror stories. The highway is a modern artery, a conduit of concrete and steel we trust to carry us safely through the night. We map our journeys by its exits and mile markers, believing in its order. But there are stretches of forgotten blacktop, tunnels through deep woods, and desolate desert passes where that order fractures. What you are about to hear are first-person accounts from ordinary people who drove into the cracks in our world. They are truckers, salespeople, students, individuals who began their trips as skeptics and ended them forever changed. Their stories in their own words. Story number 1. The Thing at the Gorge Creek Bridge. My name's Mike. I'm 44, been a long-haul trucker for 18 years. I've got a wife, 2 kids back in Toledo, and a mortgage. I've seen every kind of bad weather, every idiot driver, slept in rest stops from here to Tacoma. I don't believe in ghost stories. My world is diesel, logbooks, and hard facts. At least it was. Until the Gorge Creek Bridge. This was last November. I was on a back route through the Appalachians, a shortcut the old-timers talk about, but GPS hates. Route 43. It was pushing 2 a.m. Rain had been coming down for hours. Not a storm, just a cold, relentless drizzle that made the blacktop shine like oil under my high beams. The woods were a solid wall of black on either side. No moon, no stars, just me, my rig, and the steady thump-thump-thump of the tires over the seams in the pavement. The cab was warm, smelled of old coffee and the beef jerky I'd been gnawing on. I was tired, but it was that autopilot tired you get, where your body's driving but your mind's already home. The Gorge Creek Bridge is an old, single-lane iron truss thing, maybe 50 yards long. As I approached, my lights just swallowed by the darkness on the other side. I got this cold feeling in my gut. Not fear, just a deep, primal awareness. Like that feeling you get when you walk into a room and just know, someone's been talking about you. I rolled onto the bridge, the sound of the engine turning hollow and metallic. And halfway across, my radio died. Not to static, just silence. The kind of silence that feels thick. I glanced at the CB, dead too. Then, from below the bridge, over the sound of the swollen creek, I heard it. A dragging sound, like a big, waterlogged deer carcass being pulled up the bank. Heavy, deliberate. I instinctively slowed, peering down into the ravine, but my lights couldn't penetrate the gloom under the bridge. The dragging stopped, and then I heard the climb. Claws, not little animal claws. Long, scraping tinks and screeches on the iron girders underneath me. Something was climbing up the side of the bridge. I hit the gas. The truck lurched forward just as this shape pulled itself over the railing ahead of me, right at the end of the bridge. It stood on 2 legs, hunched, dripping wet. At first, my brain screamed bear, but it wasn't. It was too tall, too thin in the wrong places. The rain glistened on slick, dark skin that looked peeled. It had no fur. Its arms were too long, hanging past its knees, ending in hands that were more like hooks. And its head, it was elongated, like a dog's skull that had been stretched, but with no visible ears, no muzzle. Just 2 reflective spots where eyes should be, catching my high beams and glowing a sickly, liquid yellow. It didn't charge. It just turned its head and watched me come. I was doing 40, headed right for it. I laid on the air horn. The blast should have sent any living thing running. It didn't even flinch. It just took 1 step, then another, right into the middle of my lane. It was going to make me hit it. At the last second, I wrenched the wheel, my trailer fishtailing on the wet metal. I felt a thud, not heavy, like a glancing blow off my passenger side mirror. In my rear view, I saw it. It had been spun around by the impact, but it was already back on its feet. And then it crawled, on all 4s, but backwards, with a horrible, spider-like speed, keeping its head and those yellow pins for eyes fixed on my taillights. It kept up with me for 100 yards before the trees swallowed it. I didn't stop for 50 miles. My hands were welded to the wheel, shaking so bad I could barely keep her on the road. When I finally pulled into a lit truck stop, I was drenched in a cold sweat. I checked the passenger side. There was a deep, parallel set of scratches gouged into the metal of the cab, right by the mirror. And on the mirror itself, a smudge of something black and tarry, smelling like creek mud and rotten meat. I reported a possible animal collision to the state patrol just to have a record. The trooper just nodded, didn't even look surprised. He said, "Gorge Creek, huh? We get a call from that bridge about once a year. Never find nothing. I've rerouted my entire life to avoid that stretch of 43. I know what I saw. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a man. It was something that lives under that bridge, and it watches. It waits for someone to stop. And I think it's still waiting. A bridge that is not just a crossing, but a border. A creature that defies categorization, leaving only the evidence of cold scratches and a smell that haunts the memory." Mike's account is a stark reminder that some paths are older than our roads. But the horror of the highway is not confined to forgotten back routes. Sometimes it unfolds on the most modern of thoroughfares, under the sterile glow of sodium lights. Story number 2. The Whistler on I-80. Hi, I'm Chloe. I was 22 when this happened, just finished my undergrad in biology. I'm a rational person. I believe in the scientific method, in evidence. I was driving cross-country from Chicago to a summer internship in Reno. My life was podcasts, energy drinks, and planned rest stops. I didn't believe in things that go bump in the night. I do now. It was the Nebraska stretch of I-80. You know it, endless, flat, hypnotic. Miles of corn and prairie under a sky so big it feels like you re-driving on the bottom of a bowl. It was around 3 a.m. I had the cruise control set, the windows up, the AC on. The only light was the ribbon of my headlights and the occasional distant glow of a farmhouse. The world was asleep. I was utterly, completely alone. Or so I thought. I first saw the headlights way back in my rear view. A single set, gaining on me fast. No big deal, someone else burning the midnight oil. They came up behind me, right on my tail, brights blinding in my mirror. I slowed a little, moved to the right lane to let them pass. They didn't. They just sat there, maybe a car length back. I got that prickly feeling on my neck. I sped up. They sped up. I slowed down. They slowed down. This went on for 5 miles. My heart started thudding. Then, finally, they pulled into the left lane to pass. As the car drew level with me, I glanced over. It was an old, boxy sedan, maybe an early 80s model, painted a dull, primer gray. The windows were tinted pitch black, but the passenger window was rolled down. And in the darkness of that open window, I could see the silhouette of the person sitting there. They were turned, facing me, and they were whistling. Not a tune. It was a sharp, piercing, almost metallic whistle, like air through a broken flute. I could hear it clearly over the road noise and my own engine. I looked ahead, gripping the wheel, praying they'd just keep going. As their front bumper passed mine, the whistling stopped. And then, the car slowed down. It fell back beside me, matching my speed perfectly, window to window. That's when I made the mistake of looking again. The silhouette was still there, staring. But now, the interior dome light of their car flicked on. It was just for a second, but it was enough. The person wasn't wearing a mask. Their face was elongated, stretched. Their mouth was a wide, dark slit, puckered in that whistling shape. But their eyes, they were huge, glassy, and reflected the dome light with a faint, greenish shine, like an animal's. No nose, just smooth skin. They weren't human. The light flicked off. The whistling started again, louder, more frantic. And then, their car began to drift. Not swerve, drift. Slowly, inexorably, from their lane into mine. aiming to force me off the road into the ditch. I screamed. I slammed on my brakes. The gray sedan shot ahead, its brake lights never flashing. I swerved onto the shoulder, gravel pinging against the undercarriage. I sat there, engine idling, hyperventilating. I watched its taillights shrink into the distance. I thought it was over. Then, a mile ahead, I saw its brake lights finally glow red. It slowed, stopped, right there in the middle of the interstate, and it started backing up, coming back for me. I threw my car into drive and floored it. I shot past it on the shoulder, too terrified to even look. I drove at 100 miles an hour until I saw the lights of a truck stop, a beacon of sanity. I ran inside, sobbing to the clerk about a reckless driver. We looked at the security camera footage of the interstate. You could see my car fly by, and you could see, for a few frames, the gray sedan sitting motionless in the driving lane. But when the clerk zoomed in, the driver's seat was empty. The passenger seat was a solid, impenetrable shadow. I took a room at the motel next door and didn't sleep. I still drive, but never alone at night. And if I see a single set of headlights gaining on me in the empty hours, I exit at the next ramp, no matter where I am. That whistling, it wasn't a sound a human mouth can make. It was a lure, and I still don't know what it was trying to catch. A faceless pursuer on an endless road, using a sound that cuts through steel and glass to reach into a rational mind and unravel it. Chloe's story chills because of its violation of modern certainty, the safety of a lit highway, the logic of a machine. But the ancient world has its own highways, and the things that walk them care nothing for our headlights. Story number 3. The Pack on the Pine Barrens Road. Name's Frank. Retired now. Spent 35 years with the Highway Department in New Jersey, most of it maintaining the roads through the Pine Barrens. I know those sandy trails and pine forests better than I know the lines on my own hands. I've seen the weird lights people call the Jersey Devil. I've heard the stories. Always figured it was moonshine, kids, or plain old bull. I was a union man, a realist, until the night the trees started moving wrong. This was '98. A bad nor'easter had knocked out power and took down trees all over Burlington County. Me and my partner, Ray, were doing a damage survey at night after the winds died down, driving a marked pickup down this long, lonely service road, Old Mine Road. No moon, thick clouds. Our headlights were the only light for miles. The air was heavy with the smell of wet pine, torn sap, and damp earth. It was quiet, too quiet. No crickets, no owls, just the crunch of our tires on sand and broken branches. Ray saw it first. He pointed ahead, right where our beams ended. "Frank, you see that?" Between the thick pines, maybe 50 yards ahead, were shapes, low to the ground, silhouettes. At first, I thought it was storm debris or a herd of deer. The barrens have plenty, but they weren't moving like deer. They were deliberate, spaced evenly apart, blocking the road. I slowed to a crawl. As we got closer, the shapes resolved. Dogs, big ones. But no, their proportions were off. Legs too long, chests too deep. Their heads were low, but I could see the points of their ears, sharp against the gloom. There were 5 of them. They didn't run. They just stood there, staring at the truck. I stopped the truck. We were maybe 30 feet away. I hit the high beams. That's when my blood went cold. They weren't dogs. They were too big for wolves, even. Their fur was a matted, rust red and gray, like old blood on stone. But it was their eyes. They shone back our light with a bright, intelligent amber. Not the flat reflection of an animal. A knowing look. And their faces, they had the muzzles of wolves, but the brow ridge was too pronounced, almost like a man's. One of them, the biggest in the center, lifted its head, and it smiled. I swear to God, it peeled its black lips back from teeth that were too white, too many, in a grin that had no business on a beast's face. Ray whispered, "Jesus, Frank, back up." I threw the truck in reverse. The moment we moved, they moved. Not a charge, a slow, synchronized fanning out. They flowed off the road into the pines on either side, disappearing into the shadows. Our headlights now showed an empty road. "We're okay," Ray said. "They're gone." That's when we heard the first thump on the driver's side door, then another on the bed of the truck, then a scrabbling on the roof. They were flanking us, keeping pace with the reversing truck, hitting it, testing it. We could see their shapes flitting between the trees, keeping perfect pace. They were hurting us. Back down the road we came. A branch cracked loudly to our right. I jerked my head and saw the big one. It was up on its hind legs, one massive paw resting against a pine trunk, watching us. It was 7 feet tall if it was an inch. It dropped down and was gone. We reversed for a quarter mile before I found a wide enough spot to turn around. They let us. The moment our headlights pointed away from them, the harassment stopped. We drove out of there at speed, never looking back. The truck had deep, parallel scratches along both sides and dents on the roof the next day. Ray put in for a transfer the next week. Never talked about it again. I stayed, but I refused any night work on the deep forest roads. I've walked those woods all my life, but I don't go into the heart of them anymore. Not after dark. Those things, they weren't just animals. The way they moved together, the intelligence in those eyes, that god-awful smile, they were a pack. And they were letting us know that road, maybe all those roads, belonged to them. We were just allowed to use them. Sometimes. A coordinated display of territorial dominance from creatures that defy classification, part wolf, part something infinitely older. Frank's story speaks of a wilderness that remembers its rules, rules written in tooth and claw long before asphalt. But not all highways are carved through forests. Some cut across landscapes so vast and empty, they become a different kind of wilderness, where the only thing more terrifying than what you can see is what the landscape itself can hide. Story number 4. The Tumbleweed Crossing. Daniel. I run a small cattle ranch just outside Barstow. Been doing it for 30 years. The desert's my backyard. I know its moods, the heat, the dry, the way a dust devil spins. I'm a practical man. If it can't be saddled, shot, or fixed with baling wire, I don't waste much thought on it. I believe that until a trip back from a livestock auction in Phoenix showed me something the desert had been keeping to itself. It was late February, but out in the Mojave, that just means the cold cuts right through you instead of the heat baking you out. I was driving my old Ford dually down a lonely state highway. 2 lanes of cracked asphalt headed north. Flat saltbush plains stretched out to mountains that were just purple teeth on the horizon. The sun was a red wound on the western edge of the sky. No clouds, just that vast, indifferent expanse. I had the radio on for company, but it was mostly static. I was alone with my thoughts and the hum of the engine. I saw the tumbleweeds first, a whole cluster of them, rolling across the road ahead in the wind. Nothing unusual, but they caught in the barbed wire fence on the far side, piling up. As I got closer, my headlights hit them, and they stopped. The wind was still blowing. I could see the dust whipping across the asphalt, but those tumbleweeds were dead still, tangled in the fence. It was like they were waiting. I passed them, a strange itch forming between my shoulder blades. A mile later, I saw another cluster in the middle of the road. My lights hit them. They stopped rolling, just sat there. I had to swerve to avoid them. In my rear view, as soon as my taillights passed, they started moving again, rolling after me for a few feet before settling. My mouth went dry. I slowed down, my eyes glued to the roadside. That's when I saw the shapes. Not tumbleweeds on the ground, but standing. In the washes and against the mesas, silhouetted against the last of the twilight, were figures. They were tall, maybe 8, 9 feet, and impossibly thin, like bundles of sticks woven together. They were motionless, dozens of them, and they were all facing the road, facing me. As my headlights would graze one, I'd see details, not sticks, but gnarled, desiccated branches, twisted together into a crude parody of a human form, topped with a tangled, spherical mass like a dead sagebrush for a head. No faces, just presence. I hit the gas. The truck surged forward, and the figures turned, not by moving their legs. They seemed to unwind and reform, their stick-like limbs rustling with a sound like 1,000 dead leaves, and they were now facing the direction I was going. They were tracking me. Then, from the plains, more of them began to rise. They unfolded from dry creek beds, pulled themselves up from arroyos. They weren't walking. They were shuffling, dragging themselves with a horrible, dry scraping noise toward the road, converging ahead of me. The highway was becoming a gauntlet. One of them reached the edge of the pavement just as I was about to pass. In the full glare of my headlights, I saw it clearly. It wasn't just dead plants. Woven into its form were bleached bones, small animal skulls, ribs. And in the center of its head, a single, deep hollow that seemed to swallow the light. A deep, dry rattle came from it, like stones in a gourd. I aimed my truck right for it, too terrified to do otherwise. At the last second, it collapsed. Not fell apart, collapsed inward, into a heap of debris right on the shoulder. I roared past. I looked in the mirror. The heap was already untangling, pulling itself back upright. The others were at the road's edge now, lining it, those lightless hollows watching me flee. I didn't let off the gas until I saw the yellow glow of the truck stop at the junction. I sat in that lot for an hour, engine running, just shaking. I told the waitress inside I'd seen a weird dust storm. She just nodded and said, "Yeah, things get restless out there on the old Tejano road sometimes. Best not to drive it after sundown. I take the interstate now, even though it adds an hour. I can't look at a tumbleweed the same way. The desert is old, and it has its own sentinels. Things that look dead, just waiting for the right light, the right lonely traveler, to show you they're very much awake. Sentinel figures of bone and dust, guardians of ancient, thirsty land. Daniel's encounter strips away the last vestiges of our assumption that we traverse empty spaces. Nothing is ever truly empty, and sometimes the horror is not in the wilderness between points A and B, but in the destination itself, in the place that should mean safety, but has become something else entirely. My name is Marisol. I'm a travel nurse. I go where I'm needed, 6 weeks here, 8 weeks there. In 2021, I was finishing a contract in Flagstaff and heading to a new placement in Albuquerque. I've driven every major interstate in the Southwest. I'm good in a crisis. It's my job. I don't spook easily. But what happened at a gas station off I-40, it wasn't a crisis. It was a slow, quiet unraveling of reality. And I was the only one who seemed to notice. It was about 11 p.m. I was in that late drive fog, muscles aching, caffeine wearing off. I needed gas and a real bathroom, not a rest stop. My GPS pointed me to an exit promising fuel, food, and lodging. The exit ramp curled down into a shallow valley, and there it was, a single, sprawling complex. A bright, neon-lit gas station, a attached 24-hour diner with glowing windows, and a small, dark motel behind it. It looked like 100 others. A beacon. I pulled up to the pumps. The place was quiet, not deserted. There were a few other cars. A semi idled near the diesel pumps. But there was no music from the speakers, no buzz of fluorescent signs. Just a heavy, waiting silence. I swiped my card and started pumping. That's when I felt it. The air was completely still. No wind, which is strange for the desert at night. And it was warm. Unnaturally, damply warm, like the breath from a mouth. I looked toward the diner. Through the big windows, I could see people. They were sitting in booths at the counter. But no one was moving. No one was eating. They were all just sitting upright, facing forward toward the highway. It was a tableau. I finished pumping and decided to use the restroom inside the station. The bell jingled as I opened the door. The clerk behind the counter, a man with a tired face, looked up from a magazine. He smiled. It was a perfect, polite smile, but it didn't touch his eyes. His eyes were fixed, glassy, and he didn't blink. "Help you?" he said, the tone flat. The bathroom was in the back. As I walked past the aisles, I saw another customer. A woman standing in front of the coolers, holding a bottle of water. She was perfectly still, arm outstretched, not retrieving it, just holding the position, staring at the closed glass door. I hurried into the bathroom. The moment the door swung shut, the silence was absolute. I heard my own blood pounding in my ears. When I came out, the woman was gone. The bottle of water was on the floor. The clerk was in the exact same position, still smiling. I bought a bottle of water. I didn't want just to have an interaction that felt normal. As he handed me my change, his fingers were cool, almost waxy. "Drive safe now," he said. The words were right, but the cadence was wrong, like a recording played back slightly too slow. I almost ran back to my car. As I fumbled with my keys, I looked back at the diner. The people were still there, frozen. And then, as one, every single person in the window, maybe 8 or 9 of them, turned their heads, not to look at each other or at the door. They turned to look directly at me, standing by my car at the pump. Their movements were synchronized, smooth, and utterly mechanical. Their faces were bland, expressionless. I froze. We stared at each other across the asphalt for what felt like an eternity. Then, in unison, they turned their heads back to face the highway. The motion was so precise it was audible, a soft, collective shush of cloth and skin. I got in my car, locked the doors. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. I started to pull out toward the interstate on-ramp. In my headlights, I saw the trucker. He was standing beside his rig, not going toward the diner or the station. He was just standing there, looking up at the night sky. As I drove slowly past, he lowered his head and looked at me. His face was slack, empty. Then he raised one arm, not in a wave, but slowly, deliberately, and pointed. Not at me. He pointed back behind me, toward the gas station. I followed the line of his gesture in my rearview mirror. The clerk was now standing outside the station doors, under the neon light. And he was not alone. All the people from the diner were now standing outside, arranged in a loose semicircle. They were all looking at my car, all perfectly still. The clerk raised his hand, mirroring the trucker, and pointed down the road I was on, toward the on-ramp. A direction, a permission to leave. I didn't need another hint. I accelerated, tires squealing. I didn't look back. I merged onto I-40 and drove until I saw the city lights of Gallup on the horizon, crying with relief. I reported nothing. Who would I call? What would I say? The people at the gas station were too still. I've tried to find that exit again on maps. It doesn't match any of the listed services. I've asked other long-haul drivers about a bright station in a valley before Gallup. They just get quiet and change the subject. I still travel for work, but I never, ever stop at isolated service complexes at night. I keep my tank full and drive through. That place, it wasn't haunted. It was occupied by things wearing human skin badly, playing out a pantomime of service for travelers on the lonely highway. And I think they weren't threatening me. They were studying. I was the anomaly, the living, breathing, terrified woman who moved at the wrong speed. I was a glitch in their system, and they pointed me toward the exit. 5 highways, 5 stories where the journey itself became the terror. From the clawed thing under a rain-slicked bridge to the silent, staring patrons of a neon-lit purgatory, a common thread emerges, a profound and unsettling violation of the rules we depend on. The rule that a bridge is just a crossing, that a car contains a person, that a pack acts on instinct, that a desert is inert, that a rest stop offers respite. These are not mere ghost stories. They are accounts of intersection, where our modern pathways of transit cut across territories and realities that have existed for far longer, where the thin veneer of our mapped and measured world wears through, and something else peers back in. The true horror lies not in the monster, but in the realization that the road, that symbol of freedom and connection, can also be the longest, loneliest trap. Have you ever driven a stretch of road that felt wrong? Seen something in your headlights that defied explanation? The comment section below is a space for those who have felt that dread. Share your story if you dare. If you found yourself gripped by these tales, please support this channel. Like this video, subscribe to Nightbound Bloodline, and turn on notifications. We are here to document the shadows. This has been Nightbound Bloodline. Thank you for listening. Until next time, sleep with one eye open.